to say. You already knew I would come searching anyway. So I sailed across the sea to see if you were there waiting for me, but you were not. So I sailed back with a broken heart. I waited till 3 to see if you would come looking for me, but you did not. So I fell asleep with a broken heart.
They must be bored.
All right. Good evening, good night, good morning in some places. This is the Recovery Room. I am T-Bone. We tonight have a special guest. We don't do this too much, so Doc, this is like so very special, especially considering your background and what you do and your knowledge of a certain part of recovery.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Recovery.
So welcome to the Recovery Room.
But listen, we came, we saw you, we met, and just kind of instantly clicked and whatnot, you know.
Sure, we got along.
Yeah, right around the same age, and then obviously Corona kicks in and everything changes, and you know people are doing telemedicine and you know and different things, and so you know here you are with and I'm thinking you know. Thriving, is that a bad word?
No, it's a great word.
Okay, so you've got a thriving practice there, and we'll talk more about that. I wish, and we'll do this down the road, because what I'd love to see is some kind of liaison here for some people that are out there that are looking for something and don't know exactly how to get it and don't know exactly where to get it, all these different things, you know?
Right, sure.
And so,
Welcome to the Recovery Room.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent. Look at Lucky Us, right? Lucky Us here on the little old Recovery Room. And get to have like one of the mainstream guys in a you know.
Thank you.
Very cool.
In a situation where you know, like I've been doing this show for a little while now, right?
Right.
And so you know when medically assisted treatment came out, I was like, oh yeah, okay. So you take them off one drug and put them on another drug.
True, I get it.
You know, and that's what it kind of looked like, you know. And of course, I would like to, you know, obviously had to study and you know look deeper into it. You know, just can't say, well,
Like, no, I hear where you're going, and there's some real misconceptions about that. First of all, what you're really dealing with is like receptor modification. Okay, for instance, say you're born with, this is hypothetical, but say you're born with 10 opiate receptors, and you start doing opiates, whether it's because you're taking prescription drugs for a broken leg, or you're doing them for fun, you're doing them to get high, or like most of my patients, you're usually doing it to, quote, self-medicate, because underlying them is some sort of psychological problem for which they're taking medications that they just make them feel better. But the whole point of this is it's multifactorial. You have people that come in that truly, if you look back at their history, they may have, say, bipolar disorder, or they have some underlying psych issue, or they're depressed, or just grew up in a really rough way with a rough bunch of parents, rough neighborhood, and they start doing drugs. And my analogy is, say all four of us went to a frat party, we're 18, and none of us had anything to drink. Say I'm colorblind, and when I look at your red shirt, everybody calls it red, but actually what I'm seeing is green. Now I don't know that till I go in the Air Force and they give me a color test and I say, wow, what I've been seeing is calling red is actually green because I'm colorblind. So we all go to a frat party, we all have 6 beers, and you all three say, wow, I'm feeling buzzed, that feels good, and I say, I feel buzzed, I feel good. But what I'm experiencing is something completely different from you, because underlying all this, I have a psych disorder. By taking the medications, what I'm really saying is I feel normal. The other group of people get sort of hooked on drugs, and they do it honestly because, say, they have some sort of orthopedic problem, they get in a car accident, they get put on prescription drugs, and over time they just become addicted to them due to no fault of their own. And then there's another group, and the other group says, I just like doing drugs to get high. And they're the hardest ones to treat because they actually really enjoy the process. So what happens is you get people come in, and my point of view is that you sort of full court press them. Not only do you give them the medication to sort of normalize their opiate receptors, if you wish to call it that, bring them back to normal over time, which indeed is what Subutex or Suboxone does. It takes your opiate receptors, which have been modified high through abuse, and brings them back to normal, just like when you were 5 years old before you ever did drugs. So theoretically, it's a cure. I mean, it can actually bring you to the point where you no longer need the drugs chemically because your receptors are normalized. Any other questions?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting thing, and a very interesting part of it because, you know, again, that the pure concept, what everybody would think off the top is that, you know, oh yeah, one drug, face one drug with another. Sure. But what I have seen with my own eyes is that, you know, it replaces the behavior.
It does. Well, it allows you to replace it.
Yeah, it allows.
Yeah, it's a tool.
If I may say, it's been the first thing that took me from the hard behavior and drug use for decades, and for 3 months of Subutex brought me out of that.
Very cool.
And it is the first state of mind that I can now say I haven't even thought about using. When he asked me the other day, you know, how do you feel or whatever, or how do you feel about, and I'm like, about what? And like it didn't even cross my mind. It wasn't even, and I was like, holy wow, it was like an epiphany. It was crazy.
Well, you're lucky because you have a man in your life who actually has promoted the good behavior, and you know, the thing is that until you're around somebody who's addicted, you don't understand what it's like to be around someone who's addicted. I mean, that's the problem. Normal people without the addictive behavior, without the propensity to become addicted, have no idea what they're dealing with. But you know, the people that are addicted, I mean, and this is where I think a lot of the powers that be go wrong. It's not like you can put somebody on, say magically on a pill that I could give you right now, and your receptors would be normal tomorrow. Okay? Well, for 10 years you've been hanging around people that do drugs. Everything you do is centered around drugs. Where you go, who you hang out with, what you do when you hang out with them. Your whole life is one giant lie. You can't tell your husband, oh, by the way, I'm going to get a gallon of milk, when you're actually saying I'm going to go out and do drugs. You know, I need $20 to go get gas when you need $20 for pills.
Right.
And so everything that you do, the walk that you walk, the talk that you talk, is completely based around your drugs. And the analogy I give, it's like a pig being led around by the nose by their addiction. You know, their life no longer becomes their own. They're being led around by their addiction. And so what I like to do is first of all, the people come in and they're pretty much hopeless. They've lost their car, they've lost their marriage, they've lost their children, they've lost their job. They don't even have a place to live usually. And then they come to see me and they say, basically, I just don't know what to do. That's what brings them there, because they have no other avenue of hope. And so I like to address the underlying psych disorder, which the vast majority of my patients have an underlying psych disorder. So I like to get them chemically stable. I like to get them psychologically stable, emotionally stable. It's sort of like if you're a really heavy person and someone gives you a diet pill. You know, you can still go to the smorgasbord and eat 20 pieces of chicken, but you're not compelled to internally. So it's way easier to go and say, I just want one. Right. You know, but you can still eat the 20 if you want to. So once you take that out of the person's mind, that, hey, look, I no longer have to do this, I'm being driven to do it, then they're allowed to sort of heal, like you used it as a tool. You were given a tool, and you used it to your benefit and your husband's benefit and the benefit of all people concerned to sort of get yourself straight. But without that tool, it's very difficult to do that.
Minister Lord Sean.
I was thinking, I'm glad,
for so long over there.
I'm glad his analogy
man?
wasn't chocolate ice cream, because I would have said, whoa, I got an issue here. But you have someone like myself, and I've had over 300 cracks in my spine, shut in my pelvic area 4 times, broken my neck, was paralyzed, cut my finger off before. My nose was cut off when I went through the windshield.
Yeah.
I never took a single, not even aspirin.
Yeah, that was a rough marriage.
Ironically, I was hit by 8 drunk drivers living in Gainesville riding motorcycles.
Really?
8 and 10 years, yeah.
But you never took the narcotics.
No.
But here's the funny thing: if you take them for what they're designed for, now the pendulum has shifted so far the other direction. One of my sons was in the hospital after getting hit on a scooter by a lady, and he had multiple surgeries in the hospital, and they were real hesitant to give him any pain meds, and yet he's writhing in pain. So the pendulum has shifted so dramatically from, that they're so afraid to get people addicted on drugs that doctors are afraid to use the medication for what it's intended for. So the pendulum has to normalize, and that's what needs to happen in that arena.
Well, I don't like pain. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
He took me to the doctor one time, and I'd get up and make all this noise like an old man. But and he pulled my doctor aside. He goes, "For the love of God, please, can you give this man some pain meds?" And she pulled up all my history. She goes, "Sean, he won't take them."
Yeah, I got it.
And it's not because I was nervous about getting addicted. They really don't work on me. My liver's been bypassed, so I process things a lot different.
There are medicines that would work on you, but again, what I'm stressing is, these medications have a purpose. But the abuse of these medications is the problem. It's not taking the medications legitimately. I've had 10 surgeries, and every time I'm in the hospital, they give me a Dilaudid pump, and it really relieves the pain. But the entire time I'm doing it, because of what I do for a living, I'm sitting there thinking, why would anybody abuse this? It just kills the pain. It doesn't make me feel good in any way. So I think it really has to do with the person themselves. Some people are just more prone to it, some people aren't.
Well, as you just explained, as far as depending on the person and how they see and feel things, or why they use, whether it's
Totally.
And
Some people it's just a total relief. They take these drugs, and for whatever, they escape from whatever's going on in their head. So again, when they come see, like me in particular, I don't just give them the medication like, say, Subutex. I give them Subutex. I give them something so they can sleep. I give them something to help them with their bipolar disorder, their schizophrenia, their ADD, their OCD, whatever. And once that underlying condition is normal, once they're emotionally grounded, it's way easier for people to not do drugs that basically they're taking so they feel normal in the first place.
it's like, as you put me on that program, and now as I came through the hard part, and as I went through that, I was using then alcohol.
Right.
And we then took that
Yeah,
next
that's true.
step.
Yeah, we did.
And I was telling T the other day, I was like, crap, I'm getting emotional and whatever. I'm like, what is going on now? And I'm like, I have feelings. That is the problem. I have feelings. What is this about?
What it is this. Say you went on and bought a school bus, and you didn't know it when you bought it, but the parking brake was on. So for 5 years you've been driving this bus with the parking brake on, and then somebody sits there and says, hey, look, parking brake's off. And you're driving the same way you did with the parking brake on, but you're wheeling around turns and squealing to stops, because the parking brake's off. And a lot of people, they're so blunted by whatever they do that when they do come off, you're exactly right. The whole emotional experience of being alive and healthy is a dramatic change from being alive and blunted. But I'll tell you the mistake, and it's not a mistake that you're making but your perception, Terry, is one that most people have. It's like you're replacing a drug with another. But my experience, and this is what I seem to advocate when I've talked to the powers that be, is this is not an overnight fix. And most people don't have a you in their life. That's one thing I can say for sure. But most of these people, it takes years to get them completely well. What I'm saying is, over time, they for instance, say you and I were married and we had a great marriage, but now we broke up. Now, I'm not chemically addicted to you. I'm not chemically addicted to you at all. But if I can't say, I'm going to go out tomorrow and find myself a new woman. Doesn't work like that. So if I do operate with that mentality, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. But it takes a long time before I'm not thinking about you all the time, till I meet a new group of friends. Till I start doing things that we didn't do together. I might date several women till I find one that actually I really like. So the process is something that takes a long time. People have to find new friends. They say, I'm going to take up a new hobby. I'm going to play golf. They hate golf. I'm going to play tennis. They hate tennis. And finally, they end up finding something to do that they're happy with. They get a new job, it fails. They get another new job, it fails. They go back to school, and they have to figure out something that they want to do to make them feel fulfilled. And over time, it becomes easier and easier till one day they wake up and say, I'm better. But again, the medications don't get you well. The medications allow you to get well.
It's the tool to get you, to open the door, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
That's I like that one saying. I didn't need you to fix me. I needed you to love me while I fixed myself.
That's a good point. I like that. But it is true. And the thing is, I'm like their cheerleader. I mean, for instance, I had a lady come in today. She's adorable, but she has lost like 40 pounds since she started coming in. She's exercising. She now has a job. Her children are now back at home. They were taken, I think, by the welfare. People come in and they're back with their marriage. The marriage was ruined in large part because of their drugs or alcohol, and now they're back together. And they're able to have happy homes because they're whole. They're not people who are being, compelled to drink or do drugs because of some underlying issue.
It's a huge part.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's
Huge
awesome,
part.
man. So I have this thing in my mind called the 9%ers.
Okay.
The 9%ers are the 9% of the people who actually go into recovery and then make it a year
Right.
and beyond.
Right.
So, because statistically, 91% of the people who go into recovery relapse within the first year, or most within the first 30 days, or whenever.
Right.
That period is.
I know what you're getting at.
You know what I mean? And
Sure I
so,
do.
And so, what is the kind of success rate? Do you have anything that
We're good. I mean, but the thing is that it's a different model altogether. In other words, the thing is that it's really ironic. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite patients, and she came to see me, and she came on her own. But if you knew I was raised with good parents. They loved me, they encouraged me, they set a good example. When you listen to this girl's story, parents were both drug addicts. Both of them are passed. Was involved with a guy who was a drug addict. He's now in prison. She has little girls, and so she came to see me, and this is what she said. She goes, look, I got to provide my children with a better home, right? So she came to see me. 4 days later, she got pulled over, and she had, I think, a Dilaudid or an oxycodone in her purse. This very same thing she admitted to me that she was taking. So she came in with that. She actually was in trouble with the law because of that, which I find to be ironic because she came to see me, admitted that she was doing these things with the idea that she would get off of it. Now, since that time, because the courts were actually gave her a break, she's now gone back to college. She's now making straight A's in nursing. She raises her kids as well as anybody possibly could on a shoestring, but she's plagued with the problems that are a direct result of what she was doing before she came to see me, which are the drugs. There's this tail effect, and a lot of times, the longer you get away from the problem, the longer you get away from the problem. And I'm finding that it takes a few years because a lot of these people do have problems with the law. They do have problems with their children. They do have problems even paying their bills. And the more solid they get and the things that are going right, in other words, their children are back home, they held down a job, they're paying their bills, they're have successful relationships. And once they get over that, the fallout effect of their addiction, where they're no longer in trouble with the law and all that sort of passes by, then they're able to run a successful home and have a successful marriage, a successful relationship. And my point is I try to get them to that point. So I think when you're dealing with the percentage of people that don't succeed in this, I think a lot of people look at this as, okay, we're going to give you the medication and start the clock, you need to be off right away. I look at it differently. I give them the medication and give them the tools so that they can do the very things we're talking about. Get away from the people that are so influential. The people that are, if you look at them, there's an entire language that I had to get used to that these people speak. It's drug talk, but it's where they go, who they hang out with, what they spend their money on, what they do for fun, what they do when they're sad, what they do when they're hurt. It's all drugs. So when they're able to get off of the drugs and they're able to continue to do this over and over repetitively, and their things start falling, then they're able to stay off the drugs because the compulsion to do them, whether it's biochemical, whether it's emotional, whether it's psychological, whatever the reason they started on them have been maintained on them. Once that's passed and they're successful, and have a different group of friends and a different group of hobbies and a different way of life and a different job, gone back to school, whatever it is, it's easier because one day they wake up and say, like you did, what the heck was I doing? And who was that? And that's the point where they're able to stay off and be successful.
So Doc, tell us a little bit about, because we've had a couple of conversations and repeatedly you said to me, so it's really important to you. When you were asked, what did you want to be? Would you take me there, and you would say that it would be a dad or whatever?
Oh yeah, when I was a kid.
Yeah,
that's true. I remember that. I was a kid
So
once.
let's give me a little bit of humble. Give me a little bit of your humble beginnings,
Sure.
and then let's get to how you end up being this sort of,
Okay.
Healer.
Savior.
yeah, savior,
Wow.
savior.
Thanks. I'll be here tomorrow.
And then we have a couple
And-
of questions from
Sure.
some listeners too.
Absolutely.
And then you got to tell us the dog story,
Which one?
the spook.
Oh, spooky. Stop.
No, because we're gonna move
No,
into
no, it's like-
we're gonna move into because see, listen, you and I are like same age just about, right?
Sure.
And
I'm just better
and we
looking.
and we sit here together. Well, that's in the daytime. Certain lighting.
Yeah, the darker it is, the better I look. I get it. No, but here's okay. You want to know about Spooky the dog? Okay, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
a funny story. Yeah, go there first.
so my parents are professors. We lived at this corner house, and professors live near colleges. This is what the nature of it, because they teach courses and things. So I got this little dog. It's this little black and white Jack Russell looking thing, and my birthday happens to be Halloween. Well, this is back in around 1970-ish, and it wasn't normal or common to have a black family and a white family in the same neighborhood. So this family moves, another professor, real nice guy, he looked like he should be like running for president.
What year are we talking about here?
1912. No, I'm joking. I don't know.
No, you came up on the boat and everything.
Yeah, 1970, early 70s. So anyway, I get this little dog, and because my birthday's Halloween, I named it Spooky. So this black family had moved sort of catty-cornered from us, and he was a professor too. And so one night, Dr. Jones comes, we're eating dinner, knocks on the door. And my dad goes, answers the door, and he says, "Oh, hey, Bill," or whatever his name was, "how are you doing?" He goes, "Good, we're fine." And my dad says, "Hey, listen, we're eating dinner. Is there a problem?" And I'm not leaving something out. I mean, behind closed doors, my family was anything but racially motivated at all. So the guy that my dad said, "Was there anything, what are you here for?" And he says, "Well, I need to ask you something." My dad said, "What?" He said, "Well, do you have a problem with us being in the neighborhood?" Implying because they're black being in an all-white neighborhood. And my dad goes, "No, you're great." He said, "Are you sure?" He goes, "Yeah, your family's great. Your wife's great. Your kids are great. You're great. Why?" He said, "Well, recently your children, every time they get home from school, run out in the backyard and start yelling, 'Spook, spook, spooky.'" My dad goes, "They're calling the puppy." So my dad comes back to the table and he goes, "Children, the dog's name is Jip." We go, "No." He goes, "The dog's name is Jip." So I didn't think about that poor family. I thought we were doing the right thing for the kids. Here we are in the racial hotbed.
But the most interesting part of that is that a lot of these barriers that they say exist, more often than not, don't exist.
They don't exist.
No.
They're innocent, and there's a difference between innocent prejudice and malicious prejudice. I'll give you an example. So out of college, I was playing baseball, got drafted, ended up going to medical school at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Well, I was asked to play in the, quote, Negro Leagues. And I was the first and only white player at the time in the Negro Leagues, and I was a pitcher. And so my catcher was a guy they nicknamed Mule. And he was as black as your computer. And every time he called a pitch he thought would strike somebody out, all you could see was his teeth. So we had to stay in downtown Atlanta. We were at the World Series of Black Baseball. No kidding. So this guy was from Selma, Alabama, which is like, the hotbed of racial problems for a long time. And so we're staying in the hotel. He was my roommate. And so we walked downstairs and said, "Where's a good place to eat?" And they said, "Oh, go right around. There's a really good Vietnamese place." So he and I walked over there, and we're looking at the menu. And he says, "Hal, we can't eat here." I said, "Why not? It's supposed to be great." He said, "We just can't eat here." I said, "Okay, Mule, why?" So we walk out of the door, and I said, "Why couldn't you eat there? And it's supposed to be great." And he goes, "Did you see the chef?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, well, the chef was black. He said, when I eat at a Vietnamese restaurant, I want to see a Vietnamese chef. I said, oh. I said, you hypocrite. I said, you know, here you are. And he thinks about it. To this day, I speak to him occasionally, and every time he brings that up. But that was that wasn't a malicious prejudice. That guy's not being, you know, he wasn't racially motivated in an ill way. He's just being a person, and it's just what people do. But it wasn't motivated in a derogatory, judgmental, harsh, malignant way. It's just an innocent prejudice that people have.
Yeah, but you are also, because there's this thing, if you can pass down prejudice, right, you can pass down healing and
Yes,
pass down all
absolutely.
this stuff. You know what I mean? So a lot of people, and you were fortunate you had parents
Yes.
that passed down, you know, to you, you know, just that this is just equal. I mean, we do what we do, you know what I mean?
I was always taught to not be judgmental, and I was taught to try to look at people the way they really are.
Yeah.
My dad used to say, and he'd look at things, and he'd say, well, like it was a way of looking at things. He said, how do you think God looks at the situation? Like there was, I can remember I had a girl come into my office not long ago, and when you get to the core of what she got hooked on drugs about, it was due to a lot, like a really bad assault that happened to her that was sexual in nature. And, you know, she brought to my attention, she goes, I just don't, really when we spoke to her a few times, she goes, I just don't feel good enough for anything. I don't feel good enough for me. I've told people I'm not good enough for you. And I said, whoa. And I said, if you were God and you were up in heaven and you're looking down at the situation of what's happening to you as this innocent little 13-year-old, do you think he's sitting there blaming you for what's going on, or do you think he's blaming the people that are doing this to you? She goes, I never thought about it that way. I said, you know, and the other thing is, even if you did make a mistake, you know, if you take a step back and look at the mistake you made, you know, when you decide to take care of the problem, from that point forward, you're a different person. You know, and I said, so no matter what you did, if you got a handle of it on it, don't make the same mistake again and work forward from that point, you know, you're a different human being.
It's good. You said you had a couple of questions or whatever. You want to go ahead and take them now?
Yeah, Judy had asked, can you talk about how Big Pharma courted doctors with trips and bonuses to push the pain meds?
Okay, that's a true, okay. First of all, this big pharma kind of idea, I mean, I understand what they're getting at, but it really was a combination. It was like a perfect storm. I can remember that we as doctors had a sixth vital sign that they were pushed on, and it wasn't big pharma pushing it. It was okay. There was a couple of articles that basically said pain is a real prevalent problem, and we incorporated in. If you went to the ER, they got your height.
Vital sign.
Yeah, it was a vital sign basically. How is your pain? And so it was coming from there. It was coming from how debilitating pain really is to some people, a lot of people, and you know. Of course, we as doctors are sitting there looking at it saying, okay, what do we do with this? Now, if you read the thing on the literature on pain meds, there's no top threshold. It's not like they can say at 3 a day you're good. The way it is built, it's like there is no ceiling to this. So everybody is very nebulous and everyone's fishing for an answer to the problem. And I can honestly say, in spite of what that was promoted, most doctors aren't trying to do anything wrong. They're trying to do it right. They just don't really have a handle on it, but, quote, nobody did. But you know, when you look at the idea that somehow the big pharma was sort of like buying doctors to write their pain meds, I mean, I don't know anybody who was bought to write pain meds. I don't even know anybody who thought that way. I mean, it's not the way we're built, not the way we're schooled. But when you deal with people who come to you and you say, how bad's your pain? It's an 8. I can't work, can't support my family, can't do what I'm supposed to. And you look for an objective measure of this or an objective reason for it.
Maybe a 2 to Sean.
True, but an MRI is associated with herniated discs and bulging discs and problems. Then you hang your hat on that and you try to get their pain and not so they're dysfunctional, but so they can work, so they can function. But in the meantime, you know, people were developing all sorts of secondary issues with these pains as their receptor tolerance went up and they're able to take more and more and more and more. Which is interesting because I can tell you a paper I sort of wrote with a girl named Lorianne O'Connor, who's an addictionologist from up in Toronto, I believe. But we took patients and we put them on a combination of pain meds, short-acting pain meds, 6 days a week. We talked to SAMHSA, a girl named Rebecca Tragerman, who was with SAMHSA, and this was our idea. We said, look, if we put people on short-acting pain meds, okay, if you look at how Subutex works, you start here and on a microscopic way, you start developing receptor tolerance, and it keeps going up and up and up and up. So before you know it, because you double, triple, quadrupled your receptors, you need double, triple, quadruple the meds to saturate those receptors. So theoretically, if the receptors never go up, you don't need more pain meds, and there's no reason to give you more pain meds. So we put people on short-acting pain meds 6 days a week, and on their day off gave them Subutex, which is a pain med in its own right, actually stronger than morphine, on their off day. And they never developed tolerance. They'd go, theoretically, they went like this, down, this, down, this, down, and they never needed more med. So that's always been a little questionable to me, because we turned that paper in maybe 8 years ago, and nobody ever did anything with it. But theoretically, it would stop the problem worldwide pronto. You know, so it's pretty.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
On the recovery room.
Yeah, baby.
We talked to Harold Lawler. Hey, so are you like looking for more patients?
I like patients. You know, I like my
And I
patients.
know that about you.
Yeah.
You're a patient like and kind of doc. That's what I like about you.
What's really funny is it's crazy. I've never done a drug. I've never wanted to do a drug. I told my parents, if you put me on a desert island with every medication known to man, 20 years later, they'd still be all there, because I don't have the desire to do them. I'm not compelled to do them. I don't know why. Thank goodness I am. But the fact is that almost everybody I'm around now does drugs or drinks. And the thing, I don't know why, but maybe because I've never done them, I've never thought about them like that, I have a different perspective that they gravitate toward. Because when you speak, it actually sounds like you know what you're talking about, and you sort of like promote a lifestyle and lifestyle changes, which are really good for them. And once they buy into the program and start doing these things, it's just really miraculous. I mean, you can look at these people and you see over time, they come in, the first time they're there, they look like the cat dragging them behind a car, and then you see them a year later and they come in, hey, this is my husband, we're no longer estranged. Or these are my 3 children, and they no longer are living in the foster system. And oh, by the way, I've got a new job, and I've gone back to school, and I'm working 2 jobs, and they're just with it. And that's the thing that's the thing I like the most. But I think doctors in this situation, they need to really. I mean, a lot of doctors are sort of stoic, and they're reserved, but. In my job, my job is there to promote them getting better, and that means all better. That means physically better, emotionally better, psychologically better. Start exercising, lose the weight they gained laying around and doing drugs 24/7. Get their kids back. And I look at it like that. And here's the funny thing: I think that over time, that the powers that be, everyone's opposed to each other now. Pharmacists are opposed to the doctors. The welfare system they're opposed to doctors. Everybody's at odds with each other, and in reality, we're all on the same page. We should be on the same team. And I don't look at people. I do have a percentage of patients that I don't think will ever get better.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's a small
to be
percentage.
realistic about that. And then what are your feelings with all this? I mean, this is kind of like trying to save a life and whatever, and make it, there's, do you get sometimes like sad because it didn't work out? Does it affect you personally?
Oh, heck yes. I live and die by how my patients do. I sit at bed at night and I look at the ceiling and think, what can I do different? What can I do better? But I think the other thing is, I think people can sense when you're sort of giving them your best effort,
Right.
when you're telling them the truth, and I think that rings true to people no matter where they are. But I used to get really disappointed in people, but sometimes people just need a little more break, a little more break, a little more break. But success breeds success. And once they're successful, they tend to continue to be successful. They don't look back on the life they led and they're happy with it. But until they get successful, it's very easy to look back on the escape route that they had before and wish they could take it again, because they're unhappy. They're unhappy with themselves. They're unhappy with their lives. They're unhappy with their relationships. They're unhappy with their friendships. But over time, sometimes it takes more time. But I had a patient the other day. I went into some sandwich shop. I was there to get a sandwich for my son. And I went in there, and he came up. He said, "Do you recognize me?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I used to be one of your patients." I said, you
There you
did?
go.
And he said, yeah. He said, let me show you something. So it was so funny. He said, he introduced me to his friends like I was some sort of like, you know, and so he took me outside and showed me his car. I said, I bought this car myself. I said, you did? He said, yeah. He said, and he goes, and I have a driver's license. And he said, and I'm the manager of the sandwich place, and on. Oh, by the way, I'm getting married. And I thought, oh, that's really great. You know, and he was so proud of himself
Yeah.
for things that you and I take for
Rightfully
granted.
so.
Yeah, but we take it
Rightfully
for
so.
granted because we've never been there. But when you have been there and you see it, it's like it makes you feel good about what you do. And that's the end result. That's the point. And I'm trying to get people to the point where they don't remember what it was like to do drugs, that they don't even remember why they did the drugs. But all they know is they're happier not doing the drugs and they're emotionally grounded. The other thing is a lot of the meds that I put people on your receptors in your head, whether it's receptors for depression, receptors for whatever it is, when you're endogenously stressed, like from inside, or exogenously stressed from, you know, circumstances in your life, you know, whatever it is, you consume up like your serotonin. You consume up your serotonin, and before it, you're way out of sorts. I mean, you're upset all the time, you're anxious all the time, you're OCDing, you're depressed, you're worried, and you can't get it out of your head. You're just, you know, so you have to supplement that through medication, get them back to the point where they're chemically able to get on with their life and try to make things work. Until they are chemically able, they just aren't. And so to answer your question indirectly, you know, I'm not trying to replace, you know, one pill with another. What I'm trying to do is get everything balanced out in their life as best I can inside. So they're, for instance, say you're so depressed that you're basically catatonic. You're laying in your bed, you can't get out of bed, you feel like a weight of the world's on your chest. It's pretty hard for somebody to come in your bedroom and say, get out of bed. There's a sunny day outside, we'll go out and enjoy it. You're going, I can't even breathe, you know? But if I could chemically get them to the point where they're not that depressed, where they're able to get out of the house, approach their day differently, think about their day differently, then they're able to start making the day work well, but not until then.
So tell us a little bit more about your experience with the whole Suboxone and Subutex or whatever. How did that work for you? Because I know that everything doesn't work for everybody. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm trying to figure. Do you feel, Hal, that it could work for just about everybody?
Yeah, I do. Well, everybody in this situation, they have the same receptors, you know, and the thing is that, okay, it's like this. Say you and I both have Schlage locks, and I walk next door to your house and put my Schlage lock in your key. It's going to fit. It's just not going to open your door. So it fools your door into thinking you're home, but you're really not. So by binding the receptors, it fools your body into thinking you have opiates on board when you really don't. And because of that, okay, my analogy is like the little boy analogy. Say you're 5 years old and someone said, I'm going to put you in a hotel room and we're going to put, you know, the beautiful naked woman in the room with you. Don't ignore them. At 5 years old, you're more curious. You're looking around saying,
Sean's
okay.
attention.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's that number? Remember?
But you're there, and it's like you're 5 years old, and it's more of a curiosity, and you play your video games, you watch your TV, that's it. But that same little boy at 21, put him in the hotel room and say, don't notice this. He is now chemically programmed to notice that beautiful naked woman running around his hotel room. So now he's hiding under the pillow, he's taking cold showers, he's putting blinders on, he's doing anything, because he is chemically programmed to notice that woman. Now here's a mistake people make. They say, oh my gosh, look at the way you're reacting in this hotel room. So they pluck you out of the hotel room, put you on a desert island where there's nobody but you. And they watch you for a year and say, oh my gosh, you are now better because you haven't responded the way you did in that hotel room. But they pick you up and put you back in the same hotel room at 22, and you do exactly the same thing. You may have the morals of a saint, but if you put yourself in that situation over and over and over again, it's a recipe for failure. So Subutex, Suboxone, brings you from being 21 back to the age of 5, where your receptors are basically healed, they're going back to normal, and you're not chemically compelled or driven to notice that situation. It's sort of about, the other thing is we actually have programs for alcohol. And alcoholism, I'd rather be an opiate addict than an alcoholic any day of the week. Because, you know, when you're an opiate addict, you're buying your medication, or excuse me, your drugs from some guy named, you know, Roscoe in some dark alley. you know. But if you're an alcoholic, you're able to go to Publix or, you know, the Ritz-Carlton. It's all available. So it must be much more difficult, I would feel, to do that. So there are medications, there's a program that would be, again, like giving a really heavy person a diet pill that anecdotally causes people to not want to drink. A guy up at Harvard was using a couple of neurotransmitter modulators that were basically used for seizures, that they found after giving his patients this, they no longer wanted to drink, and they quit drinking on their own. So, you know, it's a full court press. My job is, again, not to just pick and choose what I get better, but to get everything better. And there are people that are really refractory to this. I mean, but it's hard to tell who they are. It's like we're not, you know, we don't have a magic wand. It's hard to tell.
Right.
True.
Wow.
Very true.
Very awesome. So, going back to your college days. Oh, no. Oh, here you go. Chrissy, you talk about the child. Chrissy, go ahead.
Which, do you want comments or you want?
Yeah, a question. But you had
Ask
something
questions.
you were going to say earlier, though, and I think you got cut off. And so you want
Me?
to go back to that. No, Christy.
Okay.
Oh, well, no, I was gonna say my experience. I had originally tried Suboxone. It didn't work. So as you chose the Subutex for my situation,
Right.
that, right on point.
That's good.
I've never been in this mental space, like I said.
Are
when
you
I-
are you in a good mental space? I'm just checking.
I'm-
No, I'm playing.
Yeah. Right?
Like I said, when I looked at him the other day and said, "Huh? What are you talking about?"
Nice.
So
No.
Mario P asked, "How do you feel about marijuana used as medicine?"
I was going to ask that too, Mario.
Well, no. The thing is, I'm not object to it at all. You know, I think that, you know, I've never smoked pot, never really wanted to again, but I've seen good things in people, particularly people with profound anxiety, and the reason I think it's a good alternative isn't because it's a panacea, but the fact is it does knock the anxiety out of existence. And when people are really profoundly anxious, like bad panic, it's debilitating because they live in fear of their panic. You know, I mean, they have a panic attack. My dad, when he had a heart attack, my dad was rock solid, and he had a heart attack, and he would call me 1, 2, 3 in the morning. He said, I have chest pain, shortness of breath. It took 3 years before I could convince him that it was just anxiety, that it really wasn't another heart attack. But it's debilitating for people because they have their first one, and it feels so real to them that they actually sit there and they live in fear of having another panic attack,
right.
which makes them have more panic attacks.
attacks,
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, that's a
He
tough
watches
one.
me sit up at night, hold my pillow because I can't lay down because I can't breathe.
Yeah, but you work through it. And the more you work through it, the better you feel. But most people, when they have a panic attack, they swear that what's going on is something physical. It's not psychological. They actually
Right.
swear
Right.
it's a real heart problem or it's something
Yeah,
else.
No, I know mine.
But here's the thing: once you know that it's a panic attack, when you have it, if you say, "This is just a panic attack, I'm going to work through it," once you start doing that, it becomes easier to work through it. I had a doctor's wife one time who saw me; who was having panic attacks, and she swore it was her heart. And this lady was in the best shape of anybody you've ever seen. She was a triathlete, and she tried to prove to me after seeing cardiologists, getting echoes, getting ultrasounds, everything. She tried to prove to me that she had a heart issue with an event monitor strapped to her chest, bicycling hard for 100 miles. And I said, did it ever occur to you that if something was wrong to your heart, you couldn't bicycle hard for 100 miles?
Miles, right.
You know, I mean, you know.
You would have crowed.
Yeah, but
Maybe.
yeah,
Maybe.
I would have that bad heart.
It's like Lance Armstrong.
Yeah.
Judy wants to know, do you think Big Pharma should take some responsibility for the opiate crisis?
No, it's a big pharma, little pharma. This is nonsense, okay? It's like, you know, this is not a pharmacologic, like mega industry, like coup. This is people that, honestly, it was very simply, for the time being, people were paying an enormous amount of attention to pain. They had incorporated into the daily life of every doctor, and pain management became a true subspecialty. The problem is when the problem's mounted, instead of developing a problem or a system of getting it better that actually made sense, they went after doctors and pharmacologic because it was sort of like cutting the head of the snake. but the head of the snake wasn't the problem. You know, and they were just doing what people were needing or what they thought was needed. But I don't see where big pharma any more than, I mean, you know, when you look at like cigarettes, when you look back in like the 30s and the 40s, Babe Ruth was saying smoke cigarettes, they're good for you. You know, I mean, all the big athletes. Yeah, exactly. You know, but I don't think that but ultimately you have to put the cigarette to your mouth and smoke it. Nobody can make you do that.
I concur. I concur.
Right, exactly. Now, Doc, when you hear healthcare reform, what kind of what's your
You mean
first
about the
reaction?
general health care, like
just
like
in
socialized
general.
medicine?
Yeah, because realistically, there's so many people that are out there and they're trying to get help, but they don't have any insurance, and,
Right.
And you know, and so
Okay, that makes good sense.
you know what I mean.
Well, here's my bias on that, and it's pretty much a holistic bias. It's not, okay. Ultimately, I mean, if you ask me how I vote, my bias is this, is that when big business thrives, the country thrives, and you can't take that out of the picture, you know. So I always look at it like, politically, I'm very conservative. When it comes to my interpersonal relationships, I'm very liberal in terms of the way I try to conduct myself with people. But the reason I'm allowed to do that, the reason I'm allowed to be, say, magnanimous, if you wish to call it that, is because I'm financially grounded. It's fairly hard to be magnanimous if you're struggling to feed your family. So what I like to think of is, and here's the thing, that if you look at the drivers of medical cost, the bulk of it, in my mind, is it's a legal issue. In other words, if as a doctor you're afraid to be sued every time you do something, you do more tests than you need. If somebody comes to your office and you swear it's not a heart problem, but you send them to the ER, why? Because you don't want to be sued for them having a heart problem. If you go to the hospital, why do they do MRIs on every little teeny bone that could possibly be damaged? Because they're worried about being sued later.
If you miss it, it's your fault.
So what I think, if my bias is this, if you look at the way the health system was, say, okay, if you look at the medicines that were available, say, 20 years ago, the medicines are really good. They're also now generic and pretty inexpensive. But if the doctor is going to be held to the standard of, hey, what's the optimal medical care, then that's going to be the standard of what was available to us today. So I think that we should have a tiered system. A tiered system be, okay, like for instance, if you get, say, food stamps, you know, I understand why they do food stamps, but I've also seen people in Publix buying filet mignon and lobster tails with their food stamps. In other words, I think in fairness, what you should do is say, okay, if you're going to get food stamps, here we've come up with a spectrum of foods that you can take, that you can buy, that are good for you, good for your family, nutritious, but it's not filet mignon. So the same analogy holds true with medicine. In other words, I think that if you had a tiered system where I think everybody in the country is allowed to have what I would consider a beginning tier kind of medical care, where they were given the antibiotics that were available 20 years ago. They were given the standard of care that was available 20 years ago. It's still very, very good. It's just not cutting edge, but it's also affordable. Now, it doesn't imply that they can't have a higher tier standard, but they should buy supplemental insurance or pay for it themselves. You're not saying no, you're just saying that you have to do this. Conversely, I think that when I was working on Longboat Key, and I would see people tool up in their, Ferraris, and they paid for everything, because they're over 65 with Medicare, that's a little hard to take too. In other words, I think that people that don't need to be taken care of by the government shouldn't be taken care of by the government. So I think it goes both ways. In other words, I think that to give you an idea though, I don't believe in a socialist system medically at all. Probably 10 years ago, I know there was a fact that we had more MRI machines in the city limits of Sarasota than they had in the entire country of Canada. I mean, no, it's no joke. In fact, I'll tell you this, I had a real patient, I can't give you her name, but her daughter was a Juno-winning musician up in Canada.
How you say that?
Canada. So she was there, it was Christmas Eve, and the mom was probably 80, and she had had a full-blown MI, and I was in looking at her, and they said, we can take her right down and bypass her right now. And she goes, no, the family was wealthy, the husband's up in Toronto, daughter's in Toronto, so she took a private jet back to Toronto, and I'd given her, the doctor was ready to accept her. It was her decision. She left. So Christmas Day, I called up to Toronto to find out how she did in her bypass surgery, and the doctor answered my phone, and he said, well, we have her on the emergency bypass list. I said, awesome, when's she going to be done? He said, 3 months. I said, we'd have had her done that
That's an
morning.
emergency.
Yeah, that was the emergency. In other words, using that as a system, if that's a system that applies to everybody, I don't get it. I mean, I do understand that there are people that financially can't afford their own medical care, they can't afford their own insurance. I got that. But I don't think that would be the same thing as saying, okay, everybody's 16, give every kid a Volvo because they're safer. It doesn't make sense. There's an inherent discrepancy in the way, people live, what they can afford, and it's unfortunate, but it's just real. So I think that if you're going to give people medical care, and it's going to be state-given medical care or baseline medical care, the doctor should be free of the potential lawsuit based on standard of care. That the people should be entitled to a baseline care that is more than adequate, but just not cutting edge. And if they want to supplement their insurance or they want to get more care, they can do it, but they either have to pay for additional insurance or pay for it themselves.
One of the medicines I'm on, actually I get it from Canada, but it's actually made in the United States and then shipped to Canada.
Right.
So it still has the address, if I buy it in the States, how much was that tea? Like $3,000 a
What's
month.
it for, if you don't mind me asking?
It helps because they bypassed my liver, I had the TIPS procedure done.
Right.
It helps get all the icky stuff out
Oh,
of
yeah.
my body.
Got it. It's an ammonia binder.
Yeah, it's riboflavin.
Reflexamin.
Yeah.
That's a veterinary med. I'm joking. No, I'm joking.
Cool. Is that why I keep trying to lick? No, I'm kidding. Whoa! I'm gonna say some Hail Mary. But instead, I get it from Canada. It's $240 for 3 months.
Right. Well, okay. Here's the thing. If you look at the cost of doing medication or developing what are we doing? I don't know how to read. Okay. All right. Anyway, but the thing is this, I give you an example. I had to give a talk. This was to a group of people. This was probably a decade ago. And there was a little simple rule. If you put money at 10%, it doubles in 7 years. Put money at 7%, it doubles in 10 years. Just remember that. So I was talking to this group of people, and they were raising Cain about the cost of some antibiotic that some company, say SmithKline, had developed. And they said, oh, they should do this and they should do that. I said, you guys, this is just sort of a tool for thinking. I said, you guys actually, at this business, do you have a 401k? They go, yes, we do. And they all put 10% of their money in this 401k. I said, do you know what, say it's Sears, it wasn't, but say, do you know what Sears does with this money with your 401k? They said, no. I said, well, they take all of your collective money and give it to an investment firm like, say, Smith Barney, and they take your millions and millions of dollars and invest it in a portfolio. You have high risk, middle risk, low risk. And I said, but I said, let me ask you this. So then I gave them the thing, and it was like, if you took at 21 years old, say $20,000 and put it in the bank at 10% and put it in the bank at 7%, what's the difference when you're 65 years old? And it's staggering. If you do it, it's like $300,000 to like $1.7 million. It's millions of dollars of difference for 3% interest, but you wouldn't think that. So I said, but when you look at what your investment firm is doing with your money, they're investing it in stocks, bonds. There's an investment portfolio. So think about this. If I came to you right now and say, SmithKline is willing to take your ammonia medication, and out of the goodness of their heart, they're going to drop it from $2,000 here in the United States to $500 here in the United States, just out of the goodness of their heart. But your investment firm is taking your 401k money and investing it in this fund, and part of the investment is SmithKline. But understand, by doing that, if you keep your money in SmithKline at the end of your 65 years working, or when you're 65 and working here, you're going to have $300,000 versus $2 million. Do you want SmithKline to keep your money in SmithKline, or do you want them to change it? And every single one of them said, well, we want them to change it. So I said, this is the problem. I said, ultimately, they're holding to their stockholders. The stockholders are basically you, whether you know it or not. So until you're willing to swallow that and say, look, we want to keep our money in there out of the goodness of SmithKline's heart, because we are on the same team and we're going to make this work. But if you take all the money out of SmithKline and invest it in another more profitable stock, they go bankrupt. So the problem is not SmithKline. The problem is a publicly held company, and you're the public, and that's just the way it is.
Well, but the funny thing is because I've gotten the medicine from both places, and it still has the address of the place and the company in the United States.
Right.
They just put it in a FedEx box, ship it to Canada, and then ship it from Canada back to me.
Brother,
Yeah, I'm like,
I don't have the answer to everything, but I do know that that's really just the truth.
Yeah.
And you know, in this country, it's a big business-driven country. And the funny thing is, people need to take a step back and say, listen, when say Home Depot's doing well, when the people that work there are getting raises, they're secure in
Right.
their jobs, you know, you don't go to the aisle, you find nobody, people are there to help you. The same guy that's selling you the power tools isn't sweeping the floors. You know, people help you take your carts out to the and this kind of thing. I mean, when Home Depot's doing well, that's when their employees, they put a new pool in the backyard, which means the concrete guy's doing well, the pool guy's doing well. Now the pool maintenance guy has another pool to maintain. And those guys now buy a new puppy for their kids because now they can afford it, and their kids go to college, and it's a trickle-down effect, and,
Right.
and it works.
One last question,
Sure.
Doc, because we're going to run out of time. Because you're like me. I've been able to sit back tonight, man. You've been putting it out there, man. I
Thanks.
can just sit back because I wasn't feeling well, and now I feel great.
You rejuvenated him.
I didn't have to talk. I was just like sucking in air. You know?
yeah, he's the quietest I've ever heard this man.
But like right, and you too.
Yeah, it's all
I'm
good.
just happy to be back.
To the double whammy, as quick as we can get this covered. The double whammy, Corona, George Floyd.
Right.
You know, we were separated and then at home, and then we got brought together
Okay.
and all that. What's your
What's my
thought on
opinion?
on Corona, and then just?
Well, I think Corona's nonsense. You know, I've always.
Hey, you heard it here first,
No.
ladies and gentlemen.
No, I mean seriously, if you really take a step back, they said 1% of people with corona die, but they're testing people that are dead. Now here's the thing: unless you died of a gunshot wound to the head or a car accident where you lost your head, they're testing you for coronavirus. But there are two different kinds of antibodies that they're testing. One's IgM, one's IgG. One, say I'd never had a cold sore, and you had a cold sore and I kissed you and I got a cold sore. That'd be an IgM antibody. Never had cold sores before, now I've got them. IgM goes up, IgM goes down. In the meantime, your IgG goes up and it reaches a plateau. That means I don't have an active virus, I had an active virus. Okay, that's where, like, say you guys had a baby and you moved to a different country and you didn't have the shot record, they would say, okay, let's do an IgG antibody test, and oh, well, your kid is inoculated for measles, mumps, rubella. IgG is high. That's what that implies. So just because you have an IgG antibody rise doesn't mean you're dying of the virus. It means it's you had the virus. So the thing is that if you take 1% and then you realize that 90% of the people that are dying of coronavirus are old, 80 years old, and relatively debilitated, the same people that would die of any acute disease. Then you deal with now, it's instead of 1 in 100, it's 1 in 1,000. And now if you realize that 90% of people that have coronavirus don't even know they've had it, now you're dealing with 1 in 10,000. So the risk of you catching the virus and dying of the virus, being a healthy, younger person, is around 1 in 10,000. Well, I'm willing to take those odds. You know, I mean, but what I don't understand is they've eliminated from the population the ability to choose. If you took a healthy 40-year-old guy with 2 kids and a wife and said, here's the idea, brother, listen, you have 2 choices. You can either quarantine your family, take them out of school, lose your house, lose your cars, lose your job, lose your marriage, and your kids are going to be stuck in a bedroom for 6 months. Or you can go out and take that 1 in 10,000 risk, go out there and keep your family solvent, keep your job, pay for the cars, pay for the house. And by the way, just because you're quarantined, you don't even really minimize the risk that much. Who wouldn't take those odds as a man? You're going to want to support your family, but they've eliminated that. Now, on the heels of that, you have this George Floyd problem. This is how I look at that. The problem I have with the George Floyd thing is not what happened to George Floyd, because it's not a black issue, it's a police issue. In my mind, it's like, it's an abuse of power, and what happened to him should be punished to the full extent of the law. It is totally wrong. The thing I mean, for instance, if this had happened to you with the life you lead and the things you stand for, you should be practically martyred. You're a good man. George Floyd was not a good man. When you look at his history, the drugs and, you know, robbing pregnant women and things like that, the problem I have is not what happened to George Floyd or the way the people that did this to George Floyd should be punished. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is take a step back. It's not a black-white issue. It's not a black police issue. It may be more prevalent, and I acknowledge that, but it's a police issue in general where you're literally abusing your power, and that's the thing that needs to stop, in my mind.
Okay. Well, what a show, what a show, what a show.
Yeah.
Thank you,
so
thank you.
You're welcome.
much, man. Hey, listen, this is the recovery room. Did we ever say that?
No, you.
We didn't even do the
I
commercials.
told you I was going to mess up the. I was going to mess
because
up the
good
intro.
stuff is
and-
good stuff. Good stuff is
And-
good stuff. Okay, so this is
We were
we've got this
excited.
on. We've got this on footage on Facebook and on YouTube for what is that? Posterity. What is the word? Posterity. Dr. Howe, Lorna, thank you so much. Dr. Howe, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on. Hey, if nobody showed you love you today, let us be the first.
We love you guys.
Love you like
You
that.
already
Not
knew
long time.
I would come searching anyway. So I said